What's going on, internet? So today what I want to do is share how to paint horizontal murals by sharing one of my latest projects of painting a parking garage. It's one of my largest projects to date, so I want to share all the insights, some of the numbers, some of the prep work, and the type of materials I was using. So let's get started. So this is one of my largest projects to date when it comes to horizontal murals. I painted basketball courts in the past and other sort of smaller projects, but this is the largest one. And this one right here came about because my friend A.L. Grimes was putting together a mural festival in Denver called Denver Walls. She approached me about doing a different wall because usually I'll paint a garage on a jazz club, but she wanted to change it up this year and have me do something a little bit bigger. So she approached the Source Hotel, which is a really nice boutique hotel in the Rhino neighborhood of Denver, Colorado, and she said, hey, we would love to partner with you with the festival and paint your garage. And not only the garage, the entire top of that garage. So this was a really cool project for me, mainly because the actual location of this garage is about half a mile from my studio. So it wasn't a big deal to actually take all this equipment and supplies and stuff back and forth, you know, throughout the week. So the first thing that we did, and what you should do whenever trying to paint a horizontal mural, is do a lot of prep work. So I visited the actual parking garage and sort of measured everything. We did a whole walkthrough. That way I could see exactly how big it is, the actual surface and what it was made of, whether it was concrete, asphalt, whatever. But most of these are concrete. You know, the type of condition it was in. It's a fairly new build, so a lot of it was fairly sort of untouched and new. Also because it's the top floor, so not a lot of people will park at the top floor. A lot of the cars will sort of park at the bottom. That's the most well sort of used area. So the top of the garage people rarely go to, but because it has a great view of the city and the surrounding areas, a lot of people will go to the top just to actually take a selfie or take photos. So that is one thing that was unique about that part of that parking garage. So I was able to take a lot of measurements, see the condition of the actual concrete, the actual ground, but I was able to look at all the obstructions because, you know, you're not just going to push paint everywhere. You have to see exactly, you know, all these sort of nooks and crannies and other sort of things that are attached to the garage in terms of stairs and poles and, you know, this building that I didn't want to touch in terms of paint wise. So what do I need to use in terms of what is that best way to apply whatever I'm going to color the entire parking garage top with. So I'm blocking everything off because I'll be painting the ground so people can't walk on it. So I have to make sure that I account for making sure that I have barricades or blockades for cars and for people as well, because I don't want people walking on the artwork while it's drying overnight or over the course of a week. When measuring the actual surface area, I took out my long measuring tape. That's something that's really good to have, especially with the horizontal murals, because a lot of them are going to be really large, like basketball courts or tennis courts, things like that. So I took out the measuring tape and measured everything, and it came to about, I would say, 16,000 square feet of actual surface area. And that's just a kind of a rough estimate because there were the sides of the walls and other structures that I had to count it for, but I couldn't really just get a good sort of measurement of those different areas. But I just wanted to make sure that I was sometimes overestimating so that I had enough material or planned for enough material to cover all of that. One thing that I did do was take out my drone. This is one of the best investments that I ever made, was buying a DJI Mavic Air 2. Really easy to fly. I record a lot of my process, my murals, but one of the things that I do a lot with this drone is prepping, doing the mock-up. So I was able to throw this drone into the sky and get a really flat image of the actual entire structure so that I can do a proper mock-up of my design that I want to actually apply to this parking garage. So once I have a good site visit, good materials in terms of pictures of that sort of parking garage from the top down, I go back to my studio and basically all I'm going to do is just prep and design. And during this process. I didn't want to do anything figurative, which is what a lot of people know me for. I wanted to stay strictly abstract on this one, mainly because I wanted it to be really fun for me and sort of just expand as an artist. So I designed something that was super abstract, a lot more intentional than just throwing colors everywhere, but also would sort of play around with the two different levels sort of coming together, but also it can stand on its own in different areas. So that is basically what I designed. I wanted to make sure that whatever I design, I can also actually execute. It has a fairly good amount of colors, but not too many to where it's going to get crazy. So those are the first two things, is actually doing a site visit with whatever you're sort of painting on, and then trying to design based on a lot of those restrictions and basically what you have in front of you. The next thing to do is figure out the right materials for that actual space. So because the space is horizontal, it will be walked on by people, but not only that, it will be driven on by people. People will park on it. It's at the top of the garage, so it's going to get a lot of sunlight. So that is something that I had to do in terms of researching a type of paint or stain or epoxy that can actually withstand all of that. And what I did was I talked to my local Behr rep at the Home Depot near my studio, and I talked to her about this project, some of the logistics restrictions, and she suggested that I use one of the Behr products called Garage Epoxy. So this is a one-part epoxy. It's acrylic based, so that just means, you know, you can clean up with water. It dries really fast. It's UV resistant, but it's technically an epoxy, but it sort of fills, it looks like regular paint. It can go through a sprayer. I can actually sort of tip the bucket over and roll the paint as well on the ground. And because it dries fast, I'm able to work, you know, with different colors on and off throughout the day. I don't have to wait a long time for the dry time to actually happen. And when you look at this product at the store, it only comes in a few different colors at the store. What you have to do is talk to that local Behr rep about getting those colors tinted to the color palette that you want. So I went through the color rack and got all the colors that would apply to my mural and said, hey, I would need to have these colors in this product. They're able to make it in gallons and 5 gallons. So I got a ton of 5-gallon buckets to work on this project. In total, I went through about 120 gallons of this product. And what was really cool about getting it tinted was that I was able to put an order in the day of and have it delivered that afternoon. So, you know, the earlier you can get it in, the easier it is for them to do same-day delivery of that tinted epoxy that you want for your project. The cost of this product is about $208 for the 5-gallon pail and about $44 for the gallon sort of pail that you can get, and that's retail. But if you have a sort of, I believe, contractor's price, or if you have that Home Depot sort of pro account where it's kind of like you get discounts on large quantities of paint, you can get it for about $166 per 5-gallon pail, or about $35 per gallon. So that's what I got in terms of the price. And when you order in large quantities, you're able to get that free delivery as well. So after figuring out this was a great product and I can go through Behr, basically that's when I went back to my design, figured out the exact colors that I was going to use for each of those different sort of colorways and sort of areas of the garage. Went back to that color rack and said, hey, these are the colors that I would need, and then the quantity. And one of the last things that I did to actually prep for this project was to figure out how to prep the actual concrete. You have to think about the amount of foot traffic, oils, dirt, dust, debris, tire marks that are embedded in that concrete or on the surface of that concrete. So you actually have to make sure that you prep and clean that concrete before you apply any product to that surface, mainly because you want to make sure it lasts as long as possible, because if you're not prepping that concrete, it's going to flake over time. So you want to make sure there's great adhesion. So what I did was I did a ton of research in terms of how to prep, and basically I found out that you have to power wash as well as etch the concrete. So I talked to A.L. Grimes from the festival and the Source Hotel and said that to prep the concrete, we need to professionally power wash and etch the concrete, the garage surface, before I actually start anything. And this is the first time I ever really did anything like this, so I had to do a ton of research in terms of what does that cost look like, how long does it take. So I called around, I took the measurements that I gathered from the actual surface of the garage, and I took pictures of it and sent it out to a couple of companies just to get quotes. And a lot of the quotes came back from $1,500 to around $3,000, depending on whether there was a water source on site that they can use, or do they have to carry their own water to the actual space that they're sort of power washing and etching. For this project was really interesting, mainly because they came with water because there wasn't a source on site, and they actually could not fit the tank in the parking garage because there's a low clearance when going up to the different floors of the parking garage. So they had to actually keep the truck at the bottom of the parking garage and have a hose pipe the water to the top. So it took about a couple of hours for them to actually clean everything on the parking garage top, and I just waited till the next day. And that's important because you do not want to actually add the epoxy or any substance to the ground while it's wet or while there's moisture in the concrete. That's mainly because it will get trapped, and then when it gets hot, when it gets cold, when the weather changes, it's going to expand and contract, and then it will start to flake. That epoxy that you put on there, the paint you put on there, will start to flake. So it is important for you to make sure that it is totally bone dry before you apply anything to that surface. And at the beginning of the next day, that is when all the paint was delivered. Everything was set up, the barricades were there. I roped off the stairs so no one could walk on it in between, and that's when I got started. So that is the end of part one of this how to paint a horizontal mural using my latest mural project as an example. I didn't want to make this video too long, so that's why I'm putting it into two parts. So this first part was all about some of the costs associated with the material, power washing, how do I prep, how do I sort of get design done. So hopefully this helped out. In part two, I'm going to show you exactly how I applied paint and how I sort of measured some of the stuff out in terms of getting the lines right in my design and translating that and scaling it up. So all those different things that I did in part two, all the things I did to actually execute the design on the actual concrete surface, I'm going to have in part two. So look out for that, and I will see you next time. Peace.